Chapter 8. Don Juan asked me abruptly if I was planning to leave for home during the weekend. I said I intended to leave Monday morning. We were sitting under his ramada around midday on Saturday, January 18th, 1969, taking a rest after a long walk in the nearby hills. Don Juan got up and went into the house. A few moments later, he called me inside. He was sitting in the middle of his room and had placed my straw mat in front of his. He motioned me to sit down, and without saying a word, he unwrapped his pipe, took it out of its sheath, filled its bowl with his smoking mixture, and lit it. He had even brought into his room a clay tray filled with small charcoals. He did not ask me whether I was willing to smoke. He just handed me the pipe and told me to puff. I did not hesitate. Don Juan had apparently assessed my mood correctly. My overwhelming curiosity about the Guardian must have been obvious to him. I did not need any coaxing and eagerly smoked the entire bowl. The reactions I had were identical to those I had had before. Don Juan also proceeded in very much the same manner. This time, however, instead of helping me to do it, he just told me to prop my right arm on the mat and lie down on my left side. He suggested that I should make a fist if that would give me a better leverage. I did make a fist with my right hand because I found it was easier than turning my palm against the floor while lying with my weight on it. I was not sleepy. I felt very warm for a while. Then I lost all feeling. Don Juan lay down on his side facing me. His right forearm rested on his elbow and propped his head up like a pillow. Everything was perfectly placid, even my body, which by then lacked tactile sensations. I felt very content. "It's nice," I said. Don Juan got up hurriedly. "Don't you dare start with that crap," he said forcefully. "Don't talk. You'll waste every bit of energy talking, and then the Guardian will mash you down, like you would smash a gnat." He must have thought that his simile was funny because he began to laugh, but he stopped suddenly. "Don't talk. Please don't talk," he said with a serious look on his face. "I wasn't about to say anything," I said, "and I really did not want to say that." Don Juan got up. I saw him walking away toward the back of his house. A moment later, I noticed that a gnat had landed on my mat, and that filled me with a kind of anxiety I had never experienced before. It was a mixture of elation, anguish, and fear. I was totally aware that something transcendental was about to unfold in front of me. A gnat who guarded the other world. It was a ludicrous thought. I felt like laughing out loud. But then I realized that my elation was distracting me, and I was going to miss a transition period I wanted to clarify. In my previous attempt to see the Guardian, I had looked at the gnat first with my left eye, and then I felt that I had stood up and looked at it with both eyes, but I was not aware how that transition had occurred. I saw the gnat whirling around on the mat in front of my face and realized that I was looking at it with both eyes. It became very close. It came very close. At a given moment, I could not see it with both eyes any longer and shifted the view to my left eye, which was level with the ground. The instant I changed focus, I also felt that I had straightened my body to a fully vertical position, and I was looking at an unbelievably enormous animal. It was brilliantly black. Its front was covered with long, black, insidious hair, which looked like spikes coming through the cracks of some slick, shiny scales. The hair was actually arranged in tufts. Its body was massive, thick, and round. Its wings were wide and short in comparison to the length of its body. It had 2 white bulging eyes and a long muzzle. This time it looked more like an alligator. It seemed to have long ears, or perhaps horns, and it was drooling. I strained myself to fix my gaze on it, and then became fully aware that I could not look at it in the same way I ordinarily look at things. I had a strange thought. Looking at the guardian's body, I felt that every single part of it was independently alive, as the eyes of men are alive. I realized then for the first time in my life that the eyes were the only part of a man that can show to me whether or not he was alive. The guardian, on the other hand, had 1,000,000 eyes. I thought this was a remarkable finding. Before this experience, I had speculated on the similes that could describe the distortions that rendered a gnat as a gigantic beast. And I had thought that a good simile was as if looking at an insect through the magnifying lens of a microscope. But that was not so. Apparently, viewing the guardian was much more complex than looking at a magnified insect. The guardian began to whirl in front of me. At one moment it stopped, and I felt it was looking at me. I noticed then that it made no sound. The dance of the guardian was silent. The awareness was in its appearance, its bulging eyes, its horrendous mouth, its drooling, its insidious hair, and above all, its incredible size. I watched very closely the way it moved its wings, how it made them vibrate with the sound, without sound. I watched how it skidded over the ground like a monumental ice skater. Looking at that nightmarish creature in front of me, I actually felt elated. I really believed that I had discovered the secret of overpowering it. I thought the guardian was only a moving picture on a silent screen. It could not harm me. It only looked terrifying. The guardian was standing still, facing me. Suddenly it fluttered its wings and turned around. Its back looked like brilliantly colored armor. Its shine was dazzling, but the hue was nauseating. It was my unfavorable color. The guardian remained with its back turned to me for a while, and then fluttering its wings again skidded out of sight. I was confronted with a very strange dilemma. I honestly believed that I had overpowered it by realizing that it presented only a picture of wrath. My belief was perhaps due to Don Juan's insistence that I knew more than I was willing to admit. At any rate, I felt I had overcome the guardian and the path was free. Yet I did not know how to proceed. Don Juan had not told me what to do in such a case. I tried to turn and look behind me, but I was unable to move. However, I could see very well over the major part of a 180-degree range in front of my eyes. And what I saw was a cloudy, pale yellow horizon. It seemed gaseous. A sort of lemon hue uniformly covered all I could see. It seemed that I was on a plateau filled with vapors of sulfur. Suddenly the guardian appeared again at a point on the horizon. It made a wide circle before stopping in front of me. Its mouth was wide open, like a huge cavern. It had no teeth. It vibrated its wings for an instant, and then it charged at me. It actually charged at me like a bull, and with its gigantic wings it swung at my eyes. I screamed with pain, and then I flew up, or rather I felt I had ejected myself up, and went soaring beyond the guardian, beyond the yellowish plateau, into another world, the world of men, and I found myself standing in the middle of Don Juan's room. January 19th, 1969. I really thought I had overpowered the guardian, I said to Don Juan. You must be kidding, he said. Don Juan had not spoken one word to me since the day before, and I did not mind it. I had been immersed in a sort of reverie, and again I had felt that if I looked intently, I would be able to see. But I did not see anything that was different. Not talking, however, had relaxed me tremendously. Don Juan asked me to recount the sequence of my experience, and what particularly interested him was the hue I had seen on the guardian's back. Don Juan sighed and seemed to be really concerned. "You were lucky that the color was on the guardian's back," he said with a serious face. "Had it been on the front part of its body, or worse yet, on its head, you would be dead by now. You must not try to see the guardian ever again. It's not your temperament to cross that plane, yet I was convinced that you could go through it. But let's not talk about it anymore. This was only one of a variety of roads." I detected an unaccustomed heaviness in Don Juan's tone. "What will happen to me if I try to see the guardian again?" "The guardian will take you away," he said. "It will pick you up in its mouth and carry you into that plane and leave you there forever. It is obvious that the guardian knew that it is not your temperament and warned you to stay away." "How do you think that the guardian knew that?" Don Juan gave me a long, steadfast look. He tried to say something, but gave up as though he was unable to find the right words. "I always fall for your questions," he said, smiling. "You were not really thinking when you asked me that, were you?" I protested and reaffirmed that it puzzled me that the guardian knew my temperament. Don Juan had a strange glint in his eye when he said, "And you had not even mentioned anything about your temperament to the guardian, had you?" His tone was so comically serious that we both laughed. After a while, however, he said that the guardian, being the keeper, the watchman of that world, knew many secrets that a brujo was entitled to share. "That's one way a brujo gets to see," he said. "But that will not be your domain, so there is no point in talking about it." "Is smoking the only way to see the guardian?" I asked. "No. You could also see it without it. There are scores of people who could do that. I prefer the smoke because it is more effective and less dangerous to oneself. If you try to see the guardian without the aid of the smoke, chances are that you may delay in getting out of its way. In your case, for instance, it is obvious that the guardian was warning you when it turned its back so you could look at your enemy color. Then it went away, but when it came back you were still there, so it charged at you. You were prepared, however, and jumped. The little smoke gave you the protection you needed. Had you gone into that world without its aid, you wouldn't have been able to extricate yourself from the guardian's grip." "Why not?" "Your movements would have been too slow. To survive in that world, you need to be as fast as lightning. It was my mistake to leave the room, but I didn't want you to talk anymore. You are a blabbermouth, so you talk even against your desire. Had I been there with you, I would have pulled your head up. You jumped up by yourself, which was even better. However, I would rather not run a risk like that. The guardian is not something you can fool around with."